Does God care about the nitty-gritty details? And what should our relationship with God be based on? Should it be based on love or fear? Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas that impact and upgrade our everyday lives. And in this episode of Wednesdays Are for Women, we join the Wednesday night group and grapple with an understanding of whether God cares about the nitty-gritty details and what our relationship with God should be like. Let's begin with a nice, easy question. Does God care about the nitty-gritty details in our lives? The tiny little decisions that we make. Does God care about them?
Okay, so I mean, it's great that we've got Joe and Rachel to start us off, because Rachel is saying, yes, like Rachel is saying, absolutely, God cares about everything, and Joe's saying, like, come on, don't be ridiculous. God doesn't care. Anyone else wants to weigh in? The challenge that I have with Danielle's answer is, you're saying that God cares about some details and not others. So for you, killing someone may not be a detail, but for someone else it may be, right? Just for example. Yeah, any thoughts about what sort of details God does care about, what sort of details God doesn't care about? We have so far, I think, the spectrum. We have yes, absolutely everything. We have no, and we have it depends. Things that are going to affect others.
Or future decisions.
Or, well, our decisions today can affect ourselves in the future. So I think there's two different things here, which is, are you going to see an immediate consequence if you do something, which is a whole nother discussion. But what we're looking at right now is does God care, right? If you think about it, like if your kid does X, Y, Z, I don't know, if you tell your child to go to bed and they don't go to bed, are you going to give them an immediate punishment? Sorry, the fork, there's forks, plenty of forks. Are you going to give them an immediate punishment? You may or you may not, right? But you might still care, right? Which is not a good analogy, as you'll see later on. But so you're saying only think that God doesn't really care if we keep Shabbos or not, or we keep kosher or not, but he does care if we do things that are going to impact other people. If I take your parking spot, that we have a wide range of opinions, and anyone that's on Zoom or on Instagram, feel free to weigh in as well. That God does care, maybe God cares, God doesn't care, and God maybe only cares about things like killing or stealing. Does he care about stealing? Only if it's a large amount. Does he care if I steal like 10 pounds? Only 20 pounds? Now, keep that question in mind, because I think it's a good question. We have not yet answered it. Hopefully by the end of the session tonight, we will have answered it. But let me ask you another question. What should our relationship with God be based on? And I'll explain the question a little bit more. There are those that talk about, love of God, that God loves us and we should love God, right? We say it in the Shema, we say V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, that you shall love God. And there is also a fear of God, right? Talk of fear of God. So what should our relationship with God be based on? Should it be based on love or fear? It's a good point that you're raising, and we have Ruthie who says both. Let's ask the question, what does it mean to fear God?
To live by his rules.
Fearing God may make us live by his rule, because we're actually told that there are 3 levels of fear of God, right? And the first level of fear of God is I think, as Sharon told us, it's a fear of punishment, right? What it basically means is a person is afraid that if I do X, Y, Z wrong, if I sin, then I'm going to get punished, whatever that punishment may look like. And that is a motivation not to do that thing, or a motivation to do a good thing. So that is a level of fear of God, but it is the lowest level. Then there is a level above that, which is really a fear of a social status. What do I mean by that? It's a someone who is afraid that when they get to the next world, they will be presented with their potential, right? Who they could have been in potential, and they will have the reality of who they will be, and they are afraid that those two won't measure up, and they will be embarrassed, right? The soul is going to be embarrassed, like, oh my goodness, I could have done X, Y, Z, and I didn't do that. So that's the second level of fear. Now, there's a third level of fear of God, which is the ideal, the highest level of fear of God, which is when a person is afraid of a lack of perfection. What does this mean? It's an understanding that God is perfect, right? And for us to get close to God, we have to be as perfect as possible, right? We're given a soul, and we have to do whatever we can to protect that soul from damaging it, which means not doing negative things. And we have to do whatever we can to perfect that soul, to make it better by doing all the positive commandments that God did that. So that third level, if you really want to sum it up, it's a level of not so much a fear of God as in God is scary, but God is awesome, right? You know, the American word awesome. I lived for 10 years in Canada. So like when you live in North America, everything's awesome, right? But when you actually stop and think about it, the word awesome is like, it's awesome. Like I once went to the Grand Canyon, and you stand there and it's like, wow, right? So when you think about like God, that is what we think of, like, wow, that's awesome. And we think of our potential of our soul, that's also awesome. And there's a fear and a motivation to not oh, there we go. Hi, Deborah. To not mess that up. Okay, so let's just sum up where we're up to at the moment. Okay, we're talking about we're going to get back to, does God care about the nitty-gritty? But in the meantime, we're talking about, what should our relationship with God be like? Should it be based on let me let Deborah in. Should it be based on love or fear? So before we could decide that, we had to define what fear is. And we said there's three levels of fear. There is fear of punishment. We're afraid that if I do X, Y, Z, I'm going to get punished. There is a fear of embarrassment, that if I do X, Y, Z, or if I don't do X, Y, Z, then I'm going to be embarrassed that I didn't fulfill my potential, or I messed up, etc. And the third level is like an awesomeness of God, an appreciation for the awesomeness of God, and wanting to access that. Now that we have that definition, let me ask you, what's better, love of God or fear of God? Or which one should we have, love of God or fear of God? No, I've well and truly stumped you. Okay, so you're saying both. Yeah. Is one better than the other? Yes, I do know what you mean, and I think you made a good point that the fear has to come from a healthy fear. It can't just be like that walking around and you know, on eggshells. It has to be a healthy. But I think love can lead to fear. What do I mean by that? If you've ever been out with a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, and they run off ahead and they get too close to a busy road, what's the emotion that you feel in the moment? Fear. What does that fear drive you to do? Run so fast and grab that kid out of the way, right? Because yes, the love is what is driving that fear, although you would probably do the same for any child that you saw running into the road. But when it's your own child, the fear is Sorry, that's okay. The fear is what was I saying? So the fear is a motivator, and that fear there's a healthy place for fear as a motivator to bring out the best in us, right? And I think especially when we look at it, when we move through the levels, when we move beyond fear of punishment, beyond fear of embarrassment, but more of like of an appreciation for the awesomeness of God, and the appreciation of the awesomeness of being connected to God, which in spirituality is being like God, that it can be a very strong motivation. But what is that based on? And this is going to answer our question. You have to have both love and fear, but we're going to talk about how we can have both in a moment. But what is the fear based on? The fear is based on knowing that there are rights and there are wrongs, right? If we think that, you know, God gave us a system of laws, and you know, that system of laws is there just because, you know, for us to earn brownie points, etc., etc., and it doesn't really matter, right? The details don't really matter. Then there's no fear, right? Because but if you know that the details matter, then there is a bit of fear. I'll give you an example. Have you ever done a bank transfer with a large amount of money, right? And what do? You check that all the numbers match up, right? And then you're probably going to check again, like, come on, don't be so nitty gritty detailed. Like, one number off, does it really make a difference?
Yeah, with that.
Yes, yes. Why do we care about the details? Because we understand that the details, like when you're doing a bank detail, right? A bank transfer, why do we care about the exact numbers? Because we understand that the numbers represent something, right? That numbers is not just a series random of number, it represents a bank account, right? And if I get the wrong bank account, then someone else is going to have a great day, but I'm not, right? because they're going to get the money and not me. And it's the same thing with the mitzvahs in the Torah. Does God care about the details? Yes. You know why? Because there are rights and there are wrongs, and each action has a real consequence, right? So we think about it like, does it really matter if I do, you know, and this question comes up, whatever standard of religion you want. I know that we have people across the spectrum, which I think is a beautiful thing to come together and learn together, no matter where we are on our religious level. But wherever you are, I think the question comes up, if you have someone that's super religious, they're going to say, does God really care if my neckline is covered? Does God really care if my elbows are covered? If you have someone that's not religious at all, they're going to say, really? Do you think God really cares whether I you know, eat on Yom Kippur? Like does God really care about the details? As long as I'm a good person, right? As long as I'm a nice person. But when we realize that the actions actually they are real, right? They are real. They have actual consequences. Sorry, I do have a sweatshirt inside if anyone wants one. They actually have real meaning, and we're told that, you know, if you think about it, like, love is all you need. It's not actually true, right? We're told in the temple times that if someone would come to the temple and offer up a sacrifice, but they didn't actually change their actions within them, it was worthless, right? Like, you can't just sort of like bribe God with, you know, whatever your lip service or whatever the thing is that you want to offer in the temple, is that you couldn't bribe God by giving him a sacrifice and not actually changing your actions. Why? Because the actions, actually, there is actually a reality to each action. And I'll share with you a story that really shows it. When Abraham and his wife Sarah went to Philistine, so he told Sarah, tell them you're my sister. Why? Because if they know that we're married, he knew they weren't scrupulous people, and they would kill Abraham in order to take Sarah. Now, what happened is they found out that they were married, and Abimelech, who was the king of Philistine, said to him, why did you tell me that your brothers and sisters? Why didn't you tell me that you're husband and wife? And then I would have. And he said, I'll tell you why. He says, because I know that there was no fear of God in this place, and because of that, I knew that you would come, you may come to kill me, right? Which is a huge accusation if you think about it. Like, come on, we're talking about fear of God, and now we're talking, like, we were all laughing around the table about killing. Like, that's a big accusation to say that someone that doesn't fear God can come to killing. What does it mean? It means that when we don't have an understanding that there is absolute rights and wrong, then we change it to suit ourselves, right? And there are movements, for example, that are pushing to say that you can kill a child up to the age of 3 if they're born defective, right? Now, yes, it is horrendous, right? We're looking around the table and we all, I think we all agree that it is horrendous. But if you don't have an absolute system of rights and wrongs, then it is a bit wishy-washy, right? And you can change it to suit yourself. And we talk about extreme, but I'm sure we can all think of a small thing in our life where you kind of feel like, you should do the right thing, but like, it doesn't matter, right? Like if you're let's say you go into the shop and you do a big grocery shop up with the kids, and then you get back to the car and you load up your car and you put everything in the car, and then you see your child holding like a banana that you forgot to pay for. And it's like, it's very, very tempting to say, it's just a banana, right? Do I go back into the shop and pay for it? Or do I just say, oh, you know what, I'll do it next time, which most oftentimes doesn't happen, right? But I think, if you look at the extreme, we can look at it and say, wow, that's crazy. But in our own life as well, like the level, when we don't realize, if we were in the moment, we'd realize, oh my goodness, that's stealing, and that's stealing has an actual impact that's going to make an impact on my soul. It's going to make an impact on the world. It's going to make it's actually real. We're going to make a different decision, right? And the reason and why we need to have it coupled with love is because I think it is what Danielle said earlier, that we can't be walking around on eggshells. It can't be a dysfunctional, unhealthy fear. It has to be a fear that motivates us to do better, and that comes from an understanding that God has given us this system because it's good for us, right? We're told that it's ways or ways of pleasantness, right? And sometimes we look at the laws and we can understand how it's pleasant, right? If you think about I don't know, Shabbat, right? We can see sometimes in our life how, when life is so busy and you've got technology and you have that one day where you can come together as a family, you can see how it's pleasant and how it adds to our lives. Sometimes we can't, right? We can't always see it, but there's that and the reason why that is, in a nutshell, we can go into it in detail another time, but because we're finite people, and God is infinite, right? So if we could understand everything that God said and did and told us to do, then that would mean that God is no greater than us. Do you get what I mean by that? Right? So to sum up what we said is that we started with the question of, does God care about the nitty-gritty? And we looked at the relationship that we're supposed to have with God. And we said there are 3 different levels of fear of God. There's fear of punishment if I mess up. There is fear of embarrassment if I don't fulfill my potential. And there is a fear or an appreciation for how awesome God is, how amazing God is, and wanting to get a little bit closer to that in our lifetime, right? And that is really the ideal, the one that we should strive for, the understanding that, wow, God is awesome, and I want a little bit of that awesomeness. I want to access a little bit of that awesomeness, and that those fears are based on the foundation and the understanding that our actions, again, the ones that the Torah talks to us about, right? Which pair of shoes we wear in the morning, they don't really matter. Which cereal you eat, they don't really matter. But the ones that God tells us about, right? For example, like kosher or whatever else, they matter because there's a spiritual reality to it, right? And that's what the fear comes from. But that fear is coupled with a love of knowing that these rules and this system that God has given us of rights and wrongs is there for our good, right? It's there for us to develop our potential, to come closer to God, to access that awesomeness in our life. So to sum up the question, does God care? I'll throw it open to you. Does God care about the nitty-gritty details? Yes, yeah. because they actually, the actions actually matter, right? So there is a reality that happens when we make those choices of what we.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. You can get in touch with me. I'm on Instagram at @GilaRoss. Thank you again for your time, and please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Have a wonderful day.